I'm Andrea, 34 years old. 3 weeks ago, I won the custody battle for my daughter, and the first thing I did with my freedom was RSVP no to my own father's birthday. My dad sent a group text to the entire family. It said, "Heirs only, no dead ends, don't bring your daughter." He wasn't just talking about me, he was talking about my 6-year-old little girl. He was erasing us both. I told him I wouldn't come. He said, "Good, we don't need your drama." 2 days later, he walked into the most expensive restaurant in the city for his 65th birthday dinner. And he froze, because at the best table in the house, there I was sitting across from the governor of our state. And when the governor stood up, shook my father's hand, and introduced me, my dad couldn't say a single word. Before I take you back to where it all began, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story earns it. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now let me take you back to the day I realized my father saw me as nothing more than a dead end. Let me tell you about the Decker family. My father, Warren Decker, turned 65 this year. He's the owner of Decker Development, a mid-size real estate firm that his father built and his father's father built before that. 3 generations of men handing things down to men. That's not a family tradition. That's a religion. Growing up, I heard one phrase more than "I love you." It was, "In this family, sons inherit, daughters marry well." I was the middle child. My older brother, Garrett, 38 now, was always the future of the company. My younger brother, Colton, 31, was the backup plan. And me, I was the girl who happened to share the last name. Here's the thing. I wasn't a bad student. I was the best student. Top of my class every year, National Honor Society, full academic scholarship to college, the only Decker kid who didn't need Dad's checkbook. And when I called to tell him the news, you know what he said? "Good. At least that saves me money for the boys' MBAs." He didn't come to my scholarship ceremony. He did fly to Garrett's business school orientation a week later, same month, and posted a photo captioned, "Legacy Continues." My mother, Catherine, was the only person who ever made me feel like I belonged in that family. She'd pull me aside after dinners where Dad only toasted the boys and whisper, "You're just as good as any of them, Andrea. Don't you ever forget that." She died when I was 15. Cancer. And whatever warmth was left in that house died with her. There's a family portrait hanging in Dad's living room. It's been there since I was 19. It shows Warren, Garrett, and Colton. 3 men, no women, no me, no Lily. My mother left me something before she passed, not money, a letter. I've kept it in my nightstand for 19 years. I'll tell you what it said, but not yet. To understand why I spent 2 years swallowing every insult my father handed me, you need to understand Derek Morrison. I met Derek in college. Charming, ambitious, came from money. The kind of money that buys silence when things go wrong. We got married when I was 26. For a few months, I thought I'd found my way out of the Decker gravity, someone who saw me. Then I got pregnant with Lily and the mask came off. Derek told me point blank that fatherhood wasn't part of his 5-year plan. He left when I was 7 months along, signed nothing, paid nothing, just vanished into his family's Connecticut estate like I was a line item he'd written off. For 5 years, it was just me and Lily. I built a career, I built a home, I built a life. And then 2 years ago, Derek came back, not to apologize, but to file for full custody. His family's lawyers were from one of the biggest firms in the state. Their argument that I was isolating Lily from her paternal and extended family, that I was emotionally unstable, that my daughter would be better off in a 2-parent household with resources. My lawyer told me something that turned my blood cold if I couldn't prove that Lily had a present, stable, extended family on my side. Derek's argument would land. That's where Warren came in. My father agreed to testify, to show up in court, say the magic words, "My granddaughter has a loving family. I'm involved. The Deckers are present," and he did. But he had a price. Not money. Obedience. Don't embarrass this family. Don't cause scenes. Know your place. For 2 years, I paid that price. Every holiday, every dinner, every text I didn't answer back. Also, a man who called me a dead end would stand in a courtroom and pretend he loved my daughter. And then, 3 weeks before his 65th birthday, the judge made her ruling: full custody, Andrea Decker. The judge said it plainly: the child has a stable home, a thriving educational environment, and a mother who has demonstrated extraordinary dedication. She noted the testimony from Lily's school, from her pediatrician, from the family counselor, and yes, from Warren. He showed up, wore his best suit, told the court that Lily was a Decker through and through and that the family was fully present. The performance of a lifetime. Derek's lawyers objected. The judge overruled. And just like that, 2 years of holding my breath was over. I walked out of the courthouse into the parking lot, sat in my car, gripped the steering wheel, and cried for 20 minutes straight. Not because I was happy, though I was, because I was free. The invisible leash that Warren had kept around my neck for 24 months had just been cut. No more smiling at dinners where I was seated next to the kitchen. No more pretending I didn't hear him introduce me as between things. No more watching my brothers get toasts while I got silence. The custody ruling didn't just give me my daughter, it gave me back myself. I sat in that car until my hands stopped shaking. Then I picked up my phone and called Claire Whitfield, someone I'll tell you more about soon. Someone who'd been in my corner when no one else was. "It's over," I said. "I'm free." Claire paused then. "Then it's time you start living like it, Andrea." I had a meeting the next morning downtown, an important one, the kind that could reshape education policy across the entire state. But I'll get to that. I folded the judge's ruling, stamped with the court's red seal, and tucked it into my bag. First document I'd carried that actually felt like armor. 2 weeks after the ruling, my phone buzzed at 11 p.m. Lily was asleep beside me. One arm thrown over her stuffed rabbit, mouth slightly open the way 6-year-olds sleep, like the world hasn't touched them yet. I picked up my phone and opened the family group chat. Warren had sent a message, one paragraph. It read, "This is a milestone. My 65th birthday dinner will be held at the Whitfield Room on Saturday evening. This celebration is for heirs only. No dead ends. Don't bring your daughter." I read it twice, then a third time. No dead ends. That was me. Don't bring your daughter. That was Lily. The man who'd stood in a courtroom 3 weeks earlier and called her a Decker through and through was now calling her a dead end in a group text. I looked at Lily sleeping. Her little hand was curled into a fist. Like even in her dreams, she was holding on to something. Then a private text from Garrett. "Dad's right. Oh, it's his night. Don't make it about you. I'll be honest. The heirs only thing was my idea. He liked it. My older brother, the one who smiled at every Thanksgiving like he wasn't watching me disappear. He'd written the words himself. I typed back to the group. "I won't come." Warren's reply was instant, like he'd been waiting. "Good. We don't need your drama. Your mother would be ashamed." My mother. He used my dead mother, his dead wife, as a weapon. And something strange happened. For the first time in my life, I didn't cry. Something inside me had shifted. The custody ruling hadn't just freed me legally, it freed something deeper. I put my phone down, I looked at Lily, and I thought about what Claire had said. Start living like it. So I opened my laptop and I made one phone call. I'm not going to tell you who I called. Not yet. Let me paint the picture so you understand. This wasn't a one-time thing. My father didn't just wake up one morning and decide I was less. He'd been building that wall my entire life, brick by brick. When I was 18, I graduated high school as valedictorian, top of my class. I stood at that podium and gave a speech about resilience. My father arrived 40 minutes late, spent the ceremony looking at his phone, and afterward drove straight to a steakhouse with Garrett to celebrate. And I quote, "His son getting into business school." He didn't say a word about my speech. Not one. When I was 26, Derek and I got married. My father gave the wedding toast. It lasted 4 minutes. 3 of those minutes were about the Decker men. His father, himself, Garrett, Colton, the legacy, the name, and then one sentence at the end. And to Andrea, may she find a good man to take care of her. Derek sat beside me, grinning. I sat there, with my fingers wrapped around a champagne glass I couldn't taste. When I was 28, Lily was born. Warren came to the hospital, looked at Lily in the bassinet, looked at me, and said, "Another girl. Well, maybe your brothers will give me grandsons." She was 6 hours old. I'm wearing my mother's ring right now, a simple gold band with a tiny emerald. Catherine left it to me in her will. I've worn it every day for 19 years. My father has never once noticed. That week after the custody ruling, I had back-to-back meetings at the state house. There was one in particular, a dinner meeting with someone important. I'd been preparing for it for months, but I'll tell you about that when the time is right. 3 months before the birthday dinner, there was Thanksgiving. I went because I still needed Warren for the custody case. Lily came with me. She wore a little plaid dress she'd picked out herself and was so excited to see her grandpa that she ran up the driveway ahead of me. Warren opened the door, looked past her, and said to me, "You're late." Inside the house was full. Warren had invited neighbors, a couple of his real estate partners, the Hendersons from the country club, important people in his mind. And when they arrived, he did what he always did. He introduced his children. "These are my boys," he said, hand on Garrett's shoulder, nodding toward Colton. Garrett and Colton, the future of Decker Development. One of the guests, a woman named Sandra, glanced at me and smiled politely. "And this young lady." My father paused like he had to recalibrate. "Oh, that's Andrea. She's between things." I wasn't between things. At that exact moment, I was a senior policy advisor for the governor's office. I had a badge with my name on it and a desk 12 floors above the state capitol rotunda. But Warren didn't know that because Warren never asked. Bethany, Garrett's wife, leaned over to me later in the kitchen and whispered, "It must be hard being the only girl, but men like Warren, they just think differently." She said it like she was being kind. She wasn't. At dinner, Lily sat next to Warren. She looked up at him with those enormous brown eyes and said loudly enough for the whole table to hear, "Grandpa, why aren't there pictures of Mommy and me in your house?" The table went silent. Warren picked up his fork. "Eat your turkey, sweetheart." After dinner, Colton pulled me onto the back porch. Cold air, dead leaves. He looked at his shoes and said, "I'm sorry about Dad." "Oh, I know it's not fair." I looked at him. My little brother, 31 years old, still afraid of his own father. "Then say something, Colton." He was quiet for a long time. Then he went back inside. That silence told me everything I needed to know about my little brother. I need you to understand how the custody case worked, not the legal fine print, but the mechanics of how my father used it. Derrick's attorney built the entire case around one word: isolation. The argument was that I'd cut Lily off from family, that she was growing up in a bubble, that her mother was too emotionally fragile to maintain healthy relationships. It was all lies. But lies are persuasive when they come in a $900 an hour suit. My lawyer said, "We need your father on the stand. We need him to say the family is present." Without that, opposing counsel drives the isolation narrative home, and we've got a real problem. So I called Warren, and he said yes. But the deal came with fine print, unspoken, unwritten, but absolute. Every time I thought about pushing back on something, declining a holiday dinner, confronting him about the family portrait, asking why Lily and I weren't included in the Christmas card, Garrett would call like clockwork. Dad said, "If you don't show up, he'll have to reconsider his testimony." Something about you being uncooperative with family. It was surgical. They didn't scream. They didn't threaten. They just held the one thing I couldn't afford to lose, my daughter, and used it as a leash. Christmas that year, I showed up, smiled, set the table, cleared the plates, washed the dishes. Nobody said thank you. Nobody asked about my work. Warren gave a toast to the Decker legacy. I dried a wine glass and stared out the kitchen window at the snow. I kept screenshots of Warren's texts during those 2 years, not as evidence for court. The case was over by then. I kept them because someday I knew I'd need to remind myself that what happened was real, that I wasn't exaggerating, that I had every right to do what I did next. A week after the Heirs only text, I was picking Lily up from school. She climbed into the back seat, buckled herself in. She'd just learned how and was quiet for a few minutes. That's unusual for Lily. She normally narrates the entire drive home like a tiny sports commentator. And then Mia said she could do a cartwheel, but she couldn't. Mommy, she really couldn't. But that day, silence. Then from the back seat, Mommy, what does dead end mean? My hands tightened on the wheel. Where did you hear that, baby? I heard Daddy's mommy say it on the phone. She said, Grandpa Warren calls us dead ends. Is that like when a road stops and there's nowhere to go? Derek's mother gossiping on the phone where a 6-year-old could hear. And she got the word from Warren, the man who typed it in a group chat like it was a dinner menu. I pulled into our driveway, turned off the engine, and turned around to look at my daughter. I don't know what my face was doing. I just know I needed it to be steady. A dead end is just a street, baby. It's where one road stops and a new one starts. That's all. She thought about that, then nodded. Okay, can I have goldfish crackers? That night, after Lily fell asleep, I opened my nightstand drawer and took out my mother's letter. The paper was soft. 19 years of folding and unfolding. The monogram at the top. C.D. Catherine Decker. I read it. The part I'd been carrying all these years. Andrea, the world will try to make you small because you're a woman. Don't let them. Not even your father. Especially not your father. Build your own table. Build your own table. I sat there for a long time looking at those words, and I realized something. This wasn't just advice. It was a blueprint. And I'd already been building quietly for years. I just hadn't shown anyone the floor plan. That night, I picked up my phone and called Claire. The dinner meeting with the governor next week. I need to change the restaurant. Okay, let me pause here for a second. If you're still with me, and I hope you are, I want to ask you something. When someone you love treats you like you don't matter, do you walk away, or do you wait for the right moment to show them exactly who you are? Drop your answer in the comments, and if this story is hitting close to home, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, but only if you feel it. Now let's keep going because what happened next, even I didn't expect how it would unfold. Warren wasn't done. He never was. The week before the birthday dinner, Garrett created a new group chat, a bigger one this time. He added Warren's brother, Robert, Robert's son, Marcus, a few cousins, and the partners who'd been invited, the planning chat, the logistics thread, the celebration of the Decker name. Garrett posted, reminder, Dad's 65th at the Whitfield room, black tie for the heirs, no +1s except spouses. This is about family legacy. My name wasn't in the chat. I wasn't added. I only knew about it because Marcus, my cousin, 34, Uncle Robert's son, texted me privately. Hey, are you coming? I noticed you're not in the group. I stared at his message. Marcus and I had never been especially close, but he'd always been decent, quiet, observant, the kind of person who notices the empty chair. I wasn't invited, I told him. A long pause. Then what? I didn't elaborate. I didn't tell him about the text, the words, the way Lily had asked me what dead end meant. I just said, it's fine. I have plans that evening. Good plans. Meanwhile, Warren was managing the narrative. He called Robert personally. Don't tell Andrea about the party details. She'll just show up and make a scene. You know how she is. Robert, the younger brother who'd spent 50 years deferring to Warren, agreed reluctantly, but he agreed. The Whitfield room, the most prestigious restaurant in the city, reservations 2 weeks out, $200 a plate, the kind of place where you don't raise your voice and you don't bring people who might embarrass you. Warren had reserved a table for 12. He thought that table was the best in the house. He was wrong. It gets worse. Because exclusion wasn't enough for Warren, he needed insurance. Marcus told me weeks later after everything happened. What Warren had been saying behind my back. The story Warren built went like this. Andrea's struggling. She lost the custody case. She's not doing well mentally. It's best if we give her space. Every word of that was a lie. I'd won the custody case. I was thriving. I was running point on the most ambitious education reform the state had seen in a decade. But Warren didn't know any of that. And he didn't care to know. He just needed a version of me that justified what he'd done. Uncle Robert called me one afternoon. His voice was careful, measured, the way people talk when they think you're fragile. Honey, your dad told me about the situation. Are you getting help? I closed my eyes. I was sitting at my desk in the governor's office, 12 floors above the Capitol Rotunda. My ID badge hung from a lanyard around my neck. O.D. Decker, Senior Policy Advisor. There was a briefing folder in front of me stamped Confidential Office of the Governor, and my uncle was asking me if I was getting help. "I'm doing fine, Uncle Robert," I said evenly. "Better than fine." He didn't sound convinced. He'd already absorbed Warren's story. The damage was done. I could have corrected him. I could have pulled out the court ruling, recited the judge's exact words, told him everything, but I didn't because I realized something sitting in that office with the state seal on the wall behind me. The truth would come out, just not from my mouth. Claire walked past my door, saw my face, and stopped. "What happened?" I told her. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, calm as a surgeon. "Let him build his narrative, Andrea. We'll let facts do the talking. They always do. That's the thing about people who lie about you. They never expect you to have receipts." Friday, the night before the birthday dinner. 2 worlds preparing for the same restaurant 30 hours apart. Warren's side. Garrett confirmed the reservation. 12 guests, the large table in the interior dining room, a custom menu featuring Wagyu and black truffle risotto. Colton had ordered a 3-tier birthday cake from the most expensive bakery in the city. Hand-piped gold leaf, dark chocolate ganache, a sugar paste replica of the Decker Development logo on top. Warren tried on his new suit that evening, a $3,800 buy-on, charcoal peak lapel, silk lining. He looked at himself in the mirror and said to Garrett, "This will be a night to remember." He was right, just not in the way he imagined. My side was quieter. I picked Lily up from school, cooked her favorite mac and cheese with the little dinosaur shapes, read her 2 chapters of a book about a girl astronaut, and tucked her in. Then I sat at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and pulled up my email. One new message. Subject line, dinner confirmation. The Whitfield Room, Saturday, 7:00 p.m. Reservation, under, Office of the Governor. 2 seats, table by the window. The best table in the house. The one with the panoramic city view, reserved exclusively for high-profile government functions. Claire had helped me move the location 2 days ago. The restaurant had accommodated the governor's office immediately. Of course, I chose my outfit carefully. Not a designer gown, not a statement piece, a sharp navy blazer, tailored trousers, a white silk blouse, and my mother's ring. Professional. Understated. The kind of outfit that doesn't need to shout. Then Lily appeared in the hallway, rubbing her eyes. "Mommy, are you having dinner with your important friend tomorrow?" I turned to her. "Yes, baby. Mommy has a very important dinner. Is he the man on TV? The one you talked to about schools?" I smiled. "Go back to sleep, sweetheart." She padded back to her room. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. Navy blazer, mom's ring, steady hands. Tomorrow, I didn't need to be loud. I just needed to show up. Saturday morning, the day of Warren Decker's 65th birthday. I woke up at 5:30. Lily was still asleep, her rabbit tucked under her chin. The house was quiet in that way that only early mornings are like the world is holding its breath. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen counter, checked my phone. The family group chat, the one I wasn't in but Marcus had been forwarding me screenshots, was already alive. Garrett had posted photos of the Whitfield Room's private dining setup. White lies and crystal vases, place cards with gold calligraphy, a framed photo of Warren at the head of the table slot. Colton posted a picture of 4 bottles of Chateau Margaux 2005, roughly $600 each, lined up like soldiers. Warren himself had written, "Tonight I celebrate 65 years and the legacy I built with my heirs by my side, his heirs. 2 sons who'd never once stood between their father and his cruelty." I stared at the screen, and for one weak, terrible moment, the old feeling came back, that hollow pull in my chest, the one that whispered, "Maybe if you just called him, maybe if you said, 'Please let me come, I'll sit at the end. I'll be quiet. Just let Lily see her grandpa on his birthday. Old habits die hard, even the ones that hurt you." Then I looked up from my phone. Lily had wandered into the kitchen, still in her pajamas, clutching her rabbit. She climbed into the chair next to me and said sleepily, "Mommy, is today the important dinner?" And I heard it again. "Mommy, what does dead end mean?" The hollow feeling left. I called Claire. "I'm having a moment." "That's normal. You're not doing anything wrong, Andrea. You're showing up to a dinner you earned. The rest is just geography." "Geography?" "I like that. 6 o'clock. Across town, Garrett pulled up to Warren's house in his black Mercedes S-Class vanity plate, December KER1. Warren walked out in the Bryan suit, adjusting a silk pocket square, his silver hair swept back like he was arriving at his own coronation. He slid into the passenger seat and said, "Where's that gift from Senator Mitchell?" Garrett handed him a small envelope. Warren turned it over, satisfied. He'd invited a state senator to boost his image, a man he donated to for 3 election cycles. That was Warren's idea of power, proximity. Stand close enough to someone important and the importance rubs off. He had no idea what real proximity looked like. Not yet. At my house, I kissed Lily goodbye at the door. Mrs. Patterson, our neighbor, a retired school librarian, the most trustworthy woman on the block, was babysitting. Lily wrapped her arms around my waist and said, "Good luck at dinner, Mommy. Tell your TV friend I said hi." I laughed, kissed her forehead. "I will, baby." I drove downtown with the windows down. The city was that particular shade of golden hour that makes everything look like a painting. Warm light on old brick. Long shadows across the avenue. I parked 3 blocks from the Whitfield Room because the lot was already filling up. Saturday night in the city. I sat in my car for 5 minutes, hands on the wheel, breathing. Then I got out, walked toward the entrance, and in the parking lot, gleaming under a streetlight, I saw it. The black Mercedes S-Class vanity plate, DC1. He was already here. I walked through the front door of the Whitfield Room. The hostess looked at her screen, then up at me, and her eyes shifted just slightly. The way people's eyes shift when a reservation carries weight. "Right this way, Miss Decker," she said. "The governor's table is ready." The Whitfield Room is the kind of restaurant where everything whispers. The linen is heavy, the lighting is low and golden, the servers move like they've rehearsed, and every table tells you exactly where you stand. I was led to the window table, the one everyone in the room can see. Panoramic glass, the city skyline spread out like a promise. White tablecloth, crystal stemware, a single orchid in a slender vase, 2 place settings. The table was reserved under office of the governor, and the staff treated it accordingly. The manager came out personally to adjust the flower arrangement. Warren's table was deeper inside the restaurant near the kitchen pass. A large round table for 12, nicely set, but positioned in what anyone in the hospitality world would recognize as the second tier. Good, not best. Visible, not prominent. I sat down, ordered sparkling water, folded my hands in my lap, waited. I could hear faintly the sounds of a large party assembling in the other room, chairs scraping, laughter, the clink of expensive glasses. Warren and his heirs gathering for the legacy dinner. I didn't look. At 7:15, Governor Thomas Hadley arrived. He walked in with a single aide, no fanfare, no security detail for a private dinner, and crossed the room to my table with the easy confidence of a man who's been in public life for 30 years. He shook my hand with both of his. "Andrea, great to see you. I've been looking forward to discussing Phase 2. This was real. This was a work dinner, not a stunt, not a setup." The governor and I had been meeting monthly about the statewide education reform initiative I'd architected. Tonight was about Phase 2 expansion into rural districts. I had a briefing binder in my bag. The restaurant manager appeared at the table. "Governor Hadley, welcome. Can I start you with anything?" The governor sat, opened his napkin, and smiled at me. "Let's get to work." And then he said something else casually, almost as an afterthought. "By the way, Andrea, that letter of commendation, I signed it yesterday. You'll get it Monday. You've earned it." A letter of commendation signed by the governor for work I'd done, while my father was telling the family I was falling apart. 30 minutes later, Warren Decker made his entrance. I didn't see it happen. I was facing the window talking policy with the governor, but I heard it. The way you hear a weather system shift before you see the clouds. The front doors of the Whitfield room opened and a group of 12 people swept into the main dining area with the kind of energy that comes from money and expectation. Warren walked in first. Brawny suit, silk tie, silver hair catching the light. Behind him, Garrett and Bethany, Colton, Uncle Robert, Marcus, and 6 other guests, business associates, old friends, people who'd been invited to witness the patriarch's coronation. The staff seated them at the interior table. Warren took the head naturally. Garrett to his right, Colton to his left. A proper kingdom. Warren surveyed the room, nodded slowly. The kind of nod that says, "This is appropriate. This is what I deserve." He didn't notice that the window table, the real centerpiece of the restaurant, wasn't his. He didn't look that far. A server brought champagne. Warren held his glass up and said to the table, 65 years and everything I built goes to my boys. That's how it should be. Garrett raised his glass to the Decker legacy. The table clinked. Everyone drank. Everyone except Marcus, who hesitated, glass half raised, eyes drifting toward the window. Marcus looked across the dining room, past the servers, past the candlelight, past the other guests, to the window table, and he saw me sitting across from a man he recognized instantly. A man whose face was on billboards, in newspapers, on television. Marcus's glass froze halfway to his lips. His mouth opened slightly, then he closed it. He didn't say a word. Not yet, but I could feel it. From 40 feet away, I could feel the first domino tilting. At my table, the conversation had moved from policy to something lighter. The governor asked about Lily, the way a decent person does when they know you're a parent. "How's your daughter, Lily, right? You mentioned she got into the gifted program." "She's wonderful," I said. "She told me yesterday she wants to be a scientist who fixes schools." He laughed. "Then she's already better at messaging than half my communications team." This was the part of working with Governor Hadley that I valued most. He saw people, not titles, not last names, not legacies, people. When I'd first been assigned to his policy team, he'd read my entire brief on education funding gaps and called me personally to say, "This is the best analysis I've seen in 20 years of public service." "You know, Andrea," he said now, setting his water glass down, "I've worked with a lot of policy people, Senate staff, federal liaison, think tanks. Very few have your combination of analytical rigor and genuine passion. The state is lucky to have you." I thanked him, but inside the irony was so sharp I could taste it. The governor of this state was telling me I was one of the best minds he'd worked with, and 40 feet away, my father was toasting the real Deckers. Then the restaurant manager appeared at our table, bending slightly at the waist. "Governor, I should let you know there's a large private party in the main dining room this evening." "The Decker party?" The governor glanced at me. "Decker? As in your family?" The question hung in the air between us, a simple question with a complicated answer. I held his gaze for a second. "Then it's my father's birthday. Should we go say hello?" He didn't invite me. The silence that followed was louder than anything Warren had ever shouted. Governor Hadley looked at me for a long moment. Then he set his napkin down very deliberately. "Tell me more about that." I didn't cry. I didn't perform. I just told the truth. The way you report a fact, not the way you tell a tragedy. My father has always valued his sons over me. He built a real estate business with his name on it and decided only his boys were worthy of it. Not because of merit, but because of gender. He calls me a dead end. He sent a group text excluding me and my 6-year-old daughter from tonight because, in his words, heirs only. I paused. Then, "Governor, I didn't choose this restaurant to create a scene. The Whitfield room has been our regular meeting spot for months. I'm not asking you to do anything. I just want to enjoy our dinner and discuss Phase 2. The governor was quiet. He picked up his water glass, took a sip, set it down, adjusted the edge of his napkin. These were the gestures of a man who'd spent 3 decades in public service, learning how to listen before he spoke. "Then, Andrea, I've met a lot of families in this job, and I've learned one thing. The people who talk the most about legacy usually understand it the least." He leaned forward slightly. "You built something real. Your work is changing children's lives across this state. thousands of them. That's legacy. A last name on a building isn't here for revenge, Governor, I said. I'm here because I earned this seat. He nodded. Yes, you did. Then he turned to his aide. Cancel my 9 o'clock. We're going to take our time tonight. The aide blinked. She clearly wasn't expecting that. Sir, cancel it. The governor turned back to me, picked up his menu, and said, Now tell me about the rural district data. I want to hear everything. He wasn't leaving early. He wasn't rushing through dinner to avoid the situation. He was settling in, and I understood why. Not because he wanted to orchestrate anything, but because he'd made a judgment about what mattered. And what mattered was the work. What happened next, though, wasn't his choice. It was Marcus's. 8:15 p.m. At Warren's table, the first course was being cleared. Seared scallops, microgreens, something with truffle oil that probably cost more than my grocery bill for the week. Garrett was telling a story about a zoning deal. Colton was nodding. Warren was presiding. Marcus excused himself. Restroom, he said. He didn't go to the restroom. I saw him before he reached the table. Tall, moving through the dining room with the deliberate pace of someone who's about to do something he can't undo. He stopped 2 feet from our table, and his eyes went from me to the governor and back to me. Andrea, he said. His voice was almost a whisper. Is that the governor? I looked up at him. Calm, steady. Marcus, this is Governor Thomas Hadley. Governor, this is my cousin Marcus Decker. The governor stood because that's what Thomas Hadley does. He stands when he's introduced to someone, and extended his hand. Nice to meet you, Marcus. Your cousin is doing incredible work for this state. Marcus shook the governor's hand. I could see his fingers trembling. I had no idea. I let that land, then quietly. That's because no one in this family ever asked. Marcus stood there for another moment. The governor gave him a small, warm smile. The kind politicians perfect over decades, but in Hadley's case, I'd come to learn it was genuine. Then Marcus nodded almost to himself and walked back across the dining room. He sat down at Warren's table. I could see him from where I sat. Garrett leaned over. What took you so long? Marcus's hands were in his lap. I could tell even from 40 feet away that they were shaking. Nothing. Just ran into someone. He didn't tell them. Not yet. But I could see the way he was looking at Warren. Really looking. The way you look at something when you finally see it clearly for the first time. The dominoes were tilting and I hadn't pushed a single one. All right, we're getting close to the moment I know you've been waiting for. But before we get there, could you do me a favor? Hit that like button. Not for the algorithm, for every woman who's ever been called a dead end by someone who is supposed to love her. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time because what happens in the next few minutes, I still get chills thinking about it. Let's go. 8:30 p.m. Warren stood up. The second course was finished. The Chateau Margaux had been poured, that deep, impossible red that only Old Bordeaux achieves. Garrett had been building to this moment all night. The toast, the big speech, the patriarch's coronation. Warren buttoned his jacket, picked up his glass, turned toward the table to address his guests, his heirs, his legacy, his kingdom. And as he turned, his gaze swept across the dining room toward the windows, toward the best table in the house, toward the soft light and the city skyline and the two people sitting there. He stopped. His whole body stopped. Not just his feet, but his hand, his breath, the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Everything locked in place like a film that had frozen on a single frame. I wasn't looking at him when it happened. The governor was mid-sentence. Something about literacy benchmarks in the third quarter, and I was listening, but I felt it. You know that feeling when someone stares at you from across a room, when the weight of their attention changes the air? I glanced up, and there he was. My father, 65 years old today, standing at the head of his table in his $3,800 brony suit, a glass of $600 Bordeaux in his hand, mouth slightly open, staring at me like I was a ghost. Is that, he said? Not to anyone in particular, just to the air. Garrett followed his gaze, the glass in his hand tilted just a degree. A single drop of Chateau Margaux fell onto the white tablecloth and spread like a bruise. What? Garrett said. Who are you looking at? Then he saw it too. The whole table went quiet. 12 people, mid-bite, mid-sentence, mid-toast. Suddenly silent. Colton was the first one to speak. That's the governor. Why is Andrea having dinner with the governor?" Warren's answer came out horse arrow, barely audible. "That's impossible." Warren put his glass down. The sound it made on the table was louder than it should have been. Or maybe the room had just gotten very quiet. "I need to go over there." Garrett grabbed his arm. "Dad, don't. You'll make a scene." Warren pulled free. "That's my daughter sitting with the governor, and she doesn't even have the decency to tell me." The irony should have cracked the ceiling. 30 minutes ago, she was a dead end. 30 minutes ago, she wasn't even worth a seat at his table. And now, my daughter, possessive, urgent, like she'd been his all along. Warren crossed the dining room, 40 feet, past the white tablecloths and the candle light, and the other guests who had no idea they were about to witness something they'd talk about for years. His stride was controlled, but I could see it, that slight irregularity in his step. The way you walk when your legs are running on pride, but your body knows you're heading towards something you can't control. I saw him coming. I'd known he would come. The moment I decided not to change restaurants, I knew, and I decided what I would do when it happened. I set my fork down, straightened my back. My mother's ring caught the candlelight. Warren arrived at the table. His eyes went from me to the governor and back to me. Up close, I could see the flush creeping up his neck, the slight shine of sweat at his temples. "Andrea." His voice was forcibly steady. "What is this?" I looked at my father, the man who'd erased me from every wall, every toast, every legacy he'd ever built, and I gave him the thing he'd never given me. Basic courtesy. "Good evening, Dad. Happy birthday." Then the governor stood up. He extended his hand across the table, tall, calm, with the practiced warmth of a man who'd shaken 10,000 hands and meant every single one. "You must be Warren Decker, he said. "I'm Thomas Hadley." Warren knew who he was. Of course he knew. This was the man he'd been trying to reach for 6 months. The man whose office had ignored every email, every request, every attempt at connection that Garrett had made on behalf of Decker Development. And now that man was standing in front of him, hand outstretched because of the daughter Warren had called a dead end. Warren shook his hand, his mouth opened. Nothing came out. The governor held the handshake a beat longer than necessary. Not aggressive, just steady, like he wanted Warren to feel the weight of the moment. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a good time because what happens in the next few minutes? I still get chills thinking about it. Let's go. 8:30 p.m., Warren stood up. The second course was finished. The Chateau Margaux had been poured, that deep, impossible red that only Old Bordeaux achieves. Garrett had been building to this moment all night. The toast, the big speech, the patriarch's coronation. Warren buttoned his jacket, picked up his glass, turned toward the table to address his guests, his heirs, his legacy, his kingdom. And as he turned, his gaze swept across the dining room toward the windows, toward the best table in the house, toward the soft light and the city skyline and the two people sitting there. He stopped. His whole body stopped. Not just his feet, but his hand, his breath, the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Everything locked in place like a film that had frozen on a single frame. I wasn't looking at him when it happened. The governor was mid-sentence, something about literacy benchmarks in the third quarter, and I was listening, but I felt it. You know that feeling when someone stares at you from across a room, when the weight of their attention changes the air? I glanced up, and there he was, my father, 65 years old today, standing at the head of his table in his $3,800 brony suit, a glass of $600 Bordeaux in his hand, mouth slightly open, staring at me like I was a ghost. "Is that?" he said. Not to anyone in particular, just to the air. Garrett followed his gaze. The glass in his hand tilted just a degree. A single drop of Chateau Margaux fell onto the white tablecloth and spread like a bruise. "What?" Garrett said. "Who are you looking at?" Then he saw it too. The whole table went quiet. 12 people, mid-bite, mid-sentence, Mid-toast. Suddenly silent. Colton was the first one to speak. That's the governor. Why is Andrea having dinner with the governor? Warren's answer came out barely audible. That's impossible. Warren put his glass down. The sound it made on the table was louder than it should have been. Or maybe the room had just gotten very quiet. I need to go over there. Garrett grabbed his arm. Dad, don't. You'll make a scene. Warren pulled free. That's my daughter sitting with the governor, and she doesn't even have the decency to tell me. The irony should have cracked the ceiling. 30 minutes ago, she was a dead end. 30 minutes ago, she wasn't even worth a seat at his table. And now, my daughter, possessive, urgent, like she'd been his all along. Warren crossed the dining room, 40 feet, past the white tablecloths and the candlelight, and the other guests, who had no idea they were about to witness something they'd talk about for years. His stride was controlled, but I could see it. That slight irregularity in his step, the way you walk when your legs are running on pride, but your body knows you're heading towards something you can't control. I saw him coming. I'd known he would come. The moment I decided not to change restaurants, I knew, and I decided what I would do when it happened. I set my fork down, straightened my back. My mother's ring caught the candlelight. Warren arrived at the table. His eyes went from me to the governor and back to me. Up close, I could see the flush creeping up his neck, the slight shine of sweat at his temples. Andrea. His voice was forcibly steady. What is this? I looked at my father, the man who'd erased me from every wall, every toast, every legacy he'd ever built, and I gave him the thing he'd never given me, basic courtesy. Good evening, Dad. Happy birthday. Then the governor stood up. He extended his hand across the table, tall, calm, with the practiced warmth of a man who'd shaken 10,000 hands and meant every single one. You must be Warren Decker, he said. I'm Thomas Hadley. Warren knew who he was. Of course he knew. This was the man he'd been trying to reach for 6 months. The man whose office had ignored every email, every request, every attempt at connection that Garrett had made on behalf of Decker Development. And now that man was standing in front of him, hand outstretched because of the daughter Warren had called a dead end. Warren shook his hand, his mouth opened, nothing came out. The governor held the handshake a beat longer than necessary. Not aggressive, just steady, like he wanted Warren to feel the weight of the moment. 12 plates at Warren's table were going cold. Nobody was eating. And then Robert stood up fully. He walked to Warren, not to the window table, to Warren, and said quietly, but with a precision that cut through every sound in that room, Warren, you told me she lost custody. You told me she was falling apart. The governor of the state is having dinner with her. He paused. What else have you lied about? Warren was still standing at my table. He hadn't moved. I don't think he could. I watched my father for a long moment. The brony suit that was supposed to make him look powerful now looked like a costume. The silk pocket square was wilting. His hands were at his sides, and for the first time in my life, they looked small. I stood up. Not fast, not dramatically. I just stood up the way you stand when you've made a decision you've been preparing for your entire life. Dad, my voice was steady, I didn't come here tonight to embarrass you. I came here because I had a dinner meeting with the governor, a meeting I earned through years of work you never cared to ask about. He blinked twice. You called me a dead end. You told the family I was falling apart. You excluded me and Lily from your birthday because we weren't heirs. The word landed like a stone in water. But here's what you missed. While you were deciding I was nothing, I was building something. Not for your approval, not for your legacy, for my daughter, for myself. I took a breath. My mother's ring was warm against my finger. I'm not asking you to be proud of me, Dad. I stopped needing that a long time ago. But I need you to hear this. Lily and I are not dead ends. We are not your shame. And if you want us in your life, it starts with respect, not control, not conditions. Respect. I sat back down, smoothed my napkin, turned to the governor. I'm sorry about that, Governor. Thomas Hadley looked at me with an expression I'll carry for the rest of my life. Not pity, not awkwardness, something warmer. Don't be sorry, Andrea. That was long overdue. Warren stood there for another 3 seconds, then he turned and walked back to his table. He didn't look at me again, not once, but I saw his hand, the one that wasn't holding anything, the one that was just hanging at his side, and it was trembling. The governor waited until Warren was back at his table. Then he reached into the leather portfolio beside his chair, the one his aide had been carrying, and pulled out a document, heavy cream-colored paper, the state seal embossed in gold at the top, a signature at the bottom that I'd seen on legislation, executive orders, and proclamations that affected millions of people. "I was going to give you this Monday," he said, "but I think you deserve it now." He slid the letter of commination across the table to me. I picked it up. My hands were trembling, not from fear, not from anger, but from the sheer weight of being seen, of someone in a position of power looking at my work and saying in writing with a seal and a signature, "You matter." The letter cited my exceptional leadership in designing and implementing the state education reform initiative, my demonstrated commitment to equitable access, and my extraordinary analytical capabilities that have directly improved outcomes for over 200,000 students statewide. 200,000 students. While my father was telling people I was between things, the governor flagged the restaurant manager. "Would you mind? I'd like to take a photo with Ms. Decker for the state's newsletter." The manager obliged. We stood side by side, the combination between us, the city skyline behind us through the window. The camera flashed from across the room. I didn't look, but I could feel it. Warren was watching. His daughter holding an official letter from the governor, posing for a state publication in the restaurant where he was supposed to be king. Marcus returned to Warren's table. He stood, not sat, and said in a voice clear enough to carry, "Uncle Warren, I just shook hands with the governor. He told me Andrea designed the education reform program the entire state is using. Did you know that?" The table looked at Warren. Warren said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The narrative he'd built, Andrea is struggling, Andrea is unstable, Andrea is a dead end, was disintegrating in real time. And the person dismantling it wasn't me. It was the truth. Uncle Robert came to the window table next. He approached slowly. The way you approach someone when you know you owe them something you can't easily repay. "Governor Hadley, I'm sorry to interrupt." Robert's voice was careful, respectful. "I'm Robert Decker, Andrea's uncle." The governor nodded warmly. "Of course, please." Robert turned to me and his face, this man who'd known me since the day I was born, who'd watched me grow up in his brother's shadow, who'd believed Warren's lies without a single phone call to verify. His face crumbled. "Andrea, I owe you an apology. Your father told me things that weren't true. I should have called you directly. I should have asked." "Thank you, Uncle Robert," I said. No edge in my voice, no lecture, just the truth. Meeting a man who was finally ready to hear it. That means a lot. He swallowed hard. "How's Lily? I haven't seen her in so long." I smiled. A real smile. The first one that evening that wasn't armor. She's amazing. She just got accepted into the state gifted and talented program. Top 2% in the state. Robert's eyes widened. Top 2%. She also started reading at 4. She loves astronomy. Last week she told me she wants to be a scientist who fixes schools because that's what she thinks I do. The dead-end granddaughter, the one who wasn't worth a seat at the birthday table. Top 2% of the state. Robert stood very still. Then his eyes filled. Not dramatically, not performatively, just the quiet overflow of a man realizing the enormity of what his family had done. He walked back to Warren's table. I couldn't hear exactly what he said, but I saw his posture change, shoulders squared, chin up, and then his voice carried just barely across the dining room. "Your granddaughter is in the top 2% of this state's gifted program. Warren, she's 6 years old, and you called her a dead end in a group text." He paused. The table was silent. "I'm ashamed to be your brother tonight." Garrett tried to salvage it because that's what Garrett does. He manages, he controls, he smooths things over so the Decker machine keeps running. He walked back to the governor's table one more time, straightening his tie, forcing his face into something resembling confidence. "Governor Hadley, I apologize for the disruption this evening. If there's anything Decker Development can do to support your office, any way we can contribute." The governor looked at him, not unkindly, but with the absolute clarity of a man who has no reason to pretend. "Mr. Decker, I appreciate the offer, but I should tell you, I'm familiar with your zoning applications. Quite familiar, in fact. They'll be reviewed through standard procedures. I don't discuss development approvals at social dinners." He paused. "I'm sure you understand. Standard procedures in government. That means you are no longer a priority. You are in the pile. You will wait like everyone else." Garrett walked back to Warren's table. I watched his face transform with every step, the false confidence falling away like plaster off a wall. By the time he sat down, he looked 10 years older. "What did he say?" Warren's voice was barely there. "It's over, Dad. He's not going to help us." "What do you mean it's over?" "I mean the man you've been trying to get a meeting with for 6 months. The one whose office has ignored every single one of my emails just found out that you disowned the person he values most on his team. The project is done. The Decker Development Redevelopment Project. Phase 3 of a commercial zoning initiative worth $4.2 million. 6 months of lobbying, networking, donating, all of it gone. Not because anyone took revenge, because the truth showed up at a dinner table." Warren turned on Garrett. His voice was low, toxic, reflexive. "This is your fault. You wrote that text, heirs only. That was your idea." Garrett stared at him. "You approved it, Dad." They sat there looking at each other. Father and eldest son, the pillars of the Decker legacy crumbling into each other. The party ended early. There was no toast, no speech, no 65 years and everything I built. The guests filed out in ones and twos, the way people leave a room where something irreversible has happened. Quiet, quick, eyes forward. Robert left without saying goodbye to Warren. He shook Marcus's shoulder on the way out, and the two of them walked into the night together. Bethany gathered her coat and followed Garrett in silence. Colton lingered, but when Warren wouldn't look at him, he left too. And then there was Warren alone at a table for 12. The 3-tier birthday cake, hand-piped gold leaf, dark chocolate ganache, the Decker Development logo, and sugar paste sat untouched at the center of the table. The candles had never been lit. I was still at my table. The governor and I had returned to our conversation. Phase 2, Rural District Data, a pilot program in the western counties. Real work, meaningful work. I could feel Warren watching from across the room, but I didn't turn. There was nothing performative left to do. The truth had done its job. I just needed to keep being myself. But I'll tell you what I noticed from the corner of my eye. Warren was looking at his hands, specifically at his left hand, at the gold wedding band he still wore. The same band Catherine had placed there 39 years ago. The same style as the ring on my finger, my mother's ring. I don't know if he'd ever noticed before that I wore it, but he noticed tonight. I could tell by the way his fingers went to his own band and held it there like he was trying to remember something he'd lost a long time ago. He stood up, walked toward the exit, didn't look back at the cake, didn't look back at me. Colton's voice came from somewhere near the coat check. "Dad, not now, Colton. Not angry, just empty." The front door closed behind him, and the last sound of Warren Decker's 65th birthday celebration was the click of an expensive latch in a very quiet room. And that was the last time I saw my father for 3 weeks, until the letter arrived. The week after was strange, like the air pressure had changed, and nobody knew how to breathe yet. Garrett called first. That alone was unprecedented. In 34 years, Garrett had never called me for anything that wasn't logistics or leverage. "Andrea?" I long pause. The sound of someone swallowing something that tasted terrible. "I didn't know about your job, about the governor, about any of it. You didn't know." I said, "Because you didn't ask. None of you did." Silence. Then I was the one who wrote the heirs-only text. I told Dad to send it. "I know. How?" "Because Dad doesn't type that fast." He didn't laugh. I didn't expect him to. There was another long silence, the kind where you can hear someone deciding whether to be honest or retreat into the comfortable machinery of denial. Garrett chose a middle ground. I'm sorry, Andrea. I hear you, Garrett. But sorry is a word. I'm going to need more than a word. He didn't know what to say to that. We hung up shortly after, but it was a start. Not a good one, but a real one. Colton texted, "Short, raw, no polish. I'm sorry. Oh, I should have stood up for you. I was a coward." I typed back, "I appreciate that, Colton. When you're ready to show Lily you mean it, she'll be here." Uncle Robert called too. He apologized genuinely, heavily, like a man carrying a bag of rocks he'd only just realized he'd been holding. He told me he'd spoken to Warren. "He's not doing well, Andrea. But that doesn't excuse anything." No, I said it doesn't. I didn't forgive anyone that week. Forgiveness isn't a light switch. It's a road. And they hadn't even started walking. But for the first time in years, my phone was ringing with calls from people who wanted to talk to me. Not at me, not around me, to me. And that was something. 3 weeks after the dinner, a letter arrived at my door. White envelope, no return address. But I recognized the handwriting immediately. The tight, precise capital letters that Warren Decker had used on every check, every contract, every birthday card he'd ever written to his sons. I'd seen that handwriting 1,000 times, just never on anything addressed to me. I sat down at the kitchen table. Lily was at school. The house was quiet. I opened the envelope, handwritten, 4 paragraphs. No lawyer, no assistant, no drafted and red-drafted corporate language. Just a man and a pen and the thing he should have said years ago. "Andrea, I haven't slept in 3 weeks. I've been sitting in my study staring at the wall and I keep seeing the same thing. You at that table with the governor wearing your mother's ring. I didn't know you wore it. That's the part that won't leave me. Not the governor, not the job, not the program you built, the ring. I didn't know. I lied to Robert. I lied to the family. I said things about you that weren't true because it was easier than admitting what I'd done, what I've been doing for 30 years. Your mother would be proud of you, not because of the governor or the combination. She wouldn't have cared about that. She'd be proud because you raised Lily into the kind of child who asks why there are no pictures of her mommy on the wall. That was always what Catherine cared about, the real things. I forgot that. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me earn it. Signed, Dad. Not Warren Decker, just Dad." I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully along the creases and opened my nightstand drawer. I placed it inside next to my mother's letter, the one I'd kept for 19 years. 2 letters side by side for the first time. Catherine's and Warren. There was a P.S. at the bottom in smaller writing. I looked up the state gifted and talented program. Top 2%. My granddaughter. I didn't know. I closed the drawer. I didn't cry. But I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. And my hands were not quite still. I didn't write back. Not yet. This wasn't a happy ending. This was a first step. And first steps don't mean much until you see where the second one lands. So here's where I am now. I used to think my father's approval was the measure of my worth. I spent 30 years trying to be good enough for a man who'd already decided I was less. Not because of anything I'd done, but because of what I was born as, a daughter. In Warren Decker's world, that was a disqualification. The night at the Whitfield room didn't fix my family. I want to be honest about that. My father didn't become a different person overnight. Garrett is still figuring out how to be a brother instead of a gatekeeper. Colton is trying. He called Lily last week and asked her about the planets, which made her so happy she talked for 40 minutes straight. Uncle Robert calls me every Sunday now. Marcus and I are actually friends, real friends, the kind where you text each other dumb things at midnight. But here's what changed. I stopped waiting. I stopped standing outside my father's house, hoping he'd open the door. I stopped rearranging myself to fit into a frame that was never built for me. My mother's letter said, "Build your own table." I did. And when I sat at it, the governor of this state chose to sit across from me. Not because of my last name, not because of my father's company, because of my work. Last week, Lily looked up from her homework and said, "Mommy, can Grandpa come to my science fair?" I looked at her, my extraordinary top 2% dead-end daughter, and I said, "If he earns it, baby, if he earns it." She nodded like that made perfect sense. To every woman listening who's ever been called a dead end by a father, a husband, a brother, a boss, anyone, I want you to hear this. You are not a dead end. You are a beginning. Build your own table, and don't let anyone tell you who gets to sit at it. And that's my story. If you made it this far, thank you truly. Before you go, I want to ask you one last thing. Have you ever had to build your own table? Tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. If this story meant something to you, hit like. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe and check out the video in the description. It's another story about someone who refused to stay small. Until next time, remember, your worth is not up for a vote. Take care of yourselves.